Online discussion boards can be a fantastic tool when used properly, although they're not by any means mandatory. If you as an instructor feel the need to include discussion boards simply to check some kind of online education box, these boards can rapidly become busy work for both you and your students, as opposed to an educational opportunity. A good discussion board can serve a variety of purposes. It can enable online students to interact with each other and build a sense of community. It can give students the opportunity to ask questions in a low-stakes environment. It can help students to develop their critical and analytical skills. But a discussion board is not necessarily the best fit for all courses. Let's think for a moment about Bloom's taxonomy. When we focus on those lower levels, those remembering and understanding levels, there is less room for interpretation and thus less room for discussion. 2 + 2 = 4. The Spanish word for cat is gato. Even a more complicated question, such as what were the causes of World War I, will elicit nearly identical answers from all students. These are pretty simplistic examples, but keep in mind that if your discussion prompt includes students merely remembering or understanding facts, there won't be much room for meaningful discussion. So if that's the case, why are you doing it? As you begin moving further up the ladder of Bloom's taxonomy into application, this is when you start to have the potential for a solid discussion. But again, this is going to depend on the topic. For example, when students in a mathematics course start applying their knowledge, there's still just going to be a right or wrong answer. 2 + 2 still equals 4. There's not much to discuss. On the other hand, basic application of foreign language skills, for example, can enable students to stretch their linguistic ability in a way that mirrors the type of language practice they might do in a lower level face-to-face in-person language class. In that case, a simple discussion could still be beneficial to students. Now, it's when we get into those levels of analysis and evaluation and creation that we can really see some in-depth discussions that actually get students thinking critically about the topic and engaging with each other and with the material, as long as your discussions are thoughtfully designed. So, how do we thoughtfully design a discussion that actually encourages academic discourse and gets students to think critically about the topic? How do we get students to consider discussions to be interesting and useful assignments as opposed to just busy work? First, ask yourself if a discussion is right for your students in your field at their specific level. Be thoughtful as you consider this because the answer is not always yes. If your students are still at those lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, coming up with a challenging yet level appropriate discussion might not be possible. And in that case, your students might be better served by a different type of assignment. Additionally, think about what kinds of in-class face-to-face discussions worked for you in your experience and what didn't, either in classes you've taught or in classes you've taken. Something that elicits limited responses from students in a face-to-face environment will be just as limited online, if not more so. There is no one right way to run an online discussion board, as it all depends on your field, your specific course, and your student's level. Let's go through a list of suggestions for making your online discussion the best it can be. I'll also add them below in the video description in case you'd prefer a written list, but let's talk through them first. Start by asking open-ended questions as opposed to questions with a right or wrong answer. Ask students to include their personal opinions and/or experiences as part of the prompt. This will not only make the responses more interesting, but will reduce students' ability to rely on AI to craft their responses. Provide students with options. Instead of requiring the entire class to respond to the same prompt, provide 2 or more prompts and allow students to respond to the one that they find the most interesting. Instead of having a text-based discussion, consider multimedia posting options such as videos, images, or files. consider using discussion boards as an interactive space for students to collaborate and plan group projects instead of a simple question and answer forum. Participate in the discussion yourself. Provide thoughtful and constructive responses and ask students questions. Just be careful not to dominate this discussion. As an alternative to participating in the discussion itself, consider providing a wrap-up post or video after each discussion closes in which you comment on key themes and clarify any misconceptions. Be sure to keep your instructions clear, straightforward, and easy to find. If you want students to discuss a text, a video, a presentation, or a previous assignment, be sure to include clear links to these items within the discussion instructions and embed them in the instructions whenever possible. Finally, assess your discussions for quality, not quantity. In other words, don't just grade on the number of posts and comments and word length. And be sure to use a rubric for grading which focuses on quality and which provides students with descriptions of what is expected of them. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions about how to improve your online discussions, or would like a downloadable version of the list of suggestions for creating quality discussions, please reach out to the CTL at ctlsupport@klamathcc.edu, by phone at 541-880-2374, or stop by Building 3, Room 350, and we'd be happy to help you out.